This is iFanboy Pick of the Week number 952, brought to you by Nerd Hero. Stop hiding your collection. Start showing it off with the Nerd Shelf. And iFanboy listeners like you. Hey, this is Josh Flanagan. I am here with my co-host, Conor Kilpatrick.
Hello. Hello.
Wait, are there two of you?
I don't know what happened. I just watched Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh,
so
okay.
that might be what happened.
I have questions about that. I've never read that book. I feel like
I'd like to read it. I would watch the original 1931 not Guillaume March. That's a comic book artist.
Yeah.
Never mind. We can't talk about this right now.
This is the iFanboy Pick of the Week, number 952. Get over it. We're moving on. Every week, one of us picks the book they like the best, talk about some stuff randomly in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
From their stack of comics, we call that the Pick of the Week. We'll talk about the book, other books from the week, the Patron Pick, listener mail, the weather, how our joints feel.
Which are related. Weather and joints are related.
That is a thing. I didn't think so, but I was like, I think it's going to rain. My knees hurt. It'll be fun. Here's your spoiler warning. Exercise caution. Connor.
I had to pick, and last week we talked about the fact that it was like every book came out. I had like 27 books. This week I had 9. Although I guess if you count the Patron Pick, I had 10. I guess you have to count it because I read it. So I had 10 books, which is a lot different. Each one has its own pluses and minuses. So let's roll into Redcoat number 7, the Pick of the Week, written by Jeff Johns, drawn by Brian Hitch. Inks, a lot of inkers this week. Inks by Hitch and Andrew Curry, Brad Anderson, Rob Lee, as we like to say, the Jeff Johns players. And I'll be honest, this book got me. We're only 7 issues in, but this was a very emotional issue.
Did you cry?
I didn't cry. We talked about this on episode 950. I've never cried from a comic, but I did get emotional about it. I did feel sad.
I was close. This was a very good comic book. This was a shockingly good comic book, especially because of the fact that it really didn't have anything to do with the narrative of the story. It was a coda on sort of the last story, and it brought home a lot that was in the books before it, but barely, and it pulled those things out. Like, it finally gave a third dimension to Simon Pure, I think, which they kind of hinted at. It rounded out whatever that weird Einstein story was and why he was there, and then just sort of brought home like what it means to be one of these people who won't die.
It was amazing because we've only had 6 issues with the two of them. And obviously we all know who Einstein is, but as characters who are friends, we only had 6 issues. So in this issue, so the first 6 issues, we were with Simon Pure and a young Albert Einstein solving crimes and fighting immortal villain Benedict Arnold in the Gilded Age.
By the way, no one is selling that pitch but Jeff Johns. And if it's not Jeff Johns, no one's reading it but us.
And he sold it to himself. So this issue opens with Simon waking up, in a haggard room with bottles and plates everywhere. That room smells terrible. And there's a lot of silent storytelling where he's looking very sad at the ceiling. We see the ceiling fan. And then there's a really wonderful sequence that doesn't make sense until you get a few more pages on, where he shaves, he fixes his hair, he shines his boots, he shines his uniform, his sword, he brushes it, and he looks in the mirror and he looks all nice, and he's got just a really sad face. Terrific work from Brian Hitch in this issue.
Yes.
It would not work without his ability to convey emotion through the art. Yeah, he opens the door to the outside world, and we are no longer in the Gilded Age. We are in the 1950s. And I just read a book. We talked about it on last year's year-end show called Forever by Pete Hamill, the old legendary newspaperman, about an immortal Irishman living in New York. And one of the things I talked about in that book that was annoying was he sort of skipped over. Like, he went from I think the 1800s to 2001. So he skipped over the whole immortal character living in the modern world. So here we've got Simon Pure living in the 1950s. He gets in a taxi. He gives the guy the address. The guy says it's a long way away. He says it's fine. Then he says pull over. He goes into a bar. Looks like he's got a Guinness in front of him, although that's the wrong glass for it. And just sits and sort of ponders it, doesn't touch it, doesn't drink it. And it's a very interesting, you're just like, what is happening right now? Right? It's revealed he shows up at this hospital. He opens the door, says, hello, lad. Very sad. And it's Einstein on his deathbed. We all, Einstein's a public person. He died in 1955. We're in 1955. And what you have here is Simon and Einstein, old adventure buddies, having one last chinwag, one last talk. Let's tell old stories. We don't see the old stories. It's all just them talking. And what was great about it was that you can see the arc between the two of them has changed. Whereas at one point when we were reading it, Einstein was the teen sidekick. He was the prototypical Robin character. And at some point that changed, obviously. At the end of it, he says, you were always a son to me, which is a heartbreaking thing, but tells you a lot about what they went through together over the years.
I do really like, though, and I think that this is largely a credit to Hitch, but also how it was written, is that Einstein in this scene is portrayed with a kind of boyish glee in his face.
He loves being on the adventures with Simon.
I know that, but I'm just saying from an artistic standpoint.
That's what I mean. Like, he really conveys that. Like, he really is happy to talk about
It's not
these
even
things.
just the happiness, though. It's a boyishness. It's a, I don't know how he did that. That's a kind of amazing thing to me, to sort of take this face that we know. And it wasn't like he was an unhappy person. Like, we've seen pictures of him smiling, but that sort of youthful exuberance that we knew him as in the earlier book, and to have it come around in that way, you know, the same way that he's putting that sadness into Simon's face, but, you know, that's not a real person. So it's a little different. But first, like, clearly Hitch benefits from having an inker. When he inks himself, it's not the same.
Well, he inked himself here too. Who knows how they split it up.
All right, but for whatever reason, like, this is fantastic Hitch, and we have seen a lot over the years that is not up to the level that's going on here. So either he's, for some reason, like, he's bringing it, or he has different styles, but it is just fantastic. This hasn't lost a step Hitch. And
like I said, it's not like we see what they're talking about. It's just these two guys in a hospital room. And what Hitch does is he gets us really close on faces. He pulls us back to the room. He gives us two shots. He gives us one. Like, he moves the camera around in a dynamic way where I was never bored with this conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's heartbreaking because you can see on Simon's face he knows what's happening, while Albert's having the time of his life reliving their adventures with his best friend. And then, you know, he tries to convey to Simon that Simon's a good person, worthy of saving, worthy of happiness, whereas Simon doesn't believe that. And then we get kind of the 6 Feet Under ending, where we have a one-page silent montage of Simon throughout history having to visit graves or be at funerals. And then we cut to today. So each panel has got a date on it: 1782, 1845, 1909. And there's Albert in the background of that one. And then we scroll over at 1955. We see Albert's passed away, and Simon's just holding his head, his hands in a big 2-page spread. I thought it was a very emotional ending. I was shocked. You know, I did not go into this week expecting to pick Redcoat. We've been enjoying it.
Yeah.
Probably no one else but yes and Jeff Johns. But I finished this and I was like, fuck, that was really good. I read it very early on, and I say that with a huge grain of salt of the 9 books I read. But I read it very early, and I kept thinking about it. And when I finished other books that I enjoyed, and there were certainly others this week, I just kept thinking that wasn't as impactful and well done as Redcoat number 7.
And surprising.
Yes.
I mean, like, it was just from out of nowhere. And you have to earn the ability to do an issue like that. And you sort of realize over time, like, they did. Because, at first you're like, this book's weird. Like, this book. I remember, like, the best thing we had to say about the first issue was, this is some wacky shit. Not like this is really well done. It was just like, this is crazy. Where are they going with this? It was definitely like I don't know that I like this yet. And I felt like that for a bunch of issues. And then at a certain point, you kind of like got an idea about what it was, and it kept getting wackier. So then to sort of be able to turn that around and make it into this really emotional coda of a story. And there's a lot going on here. Like, part of it is also just that the thing about, you're worth something. You are a good person. Don't convince yourself that you're not. That's a very universal thought to people who read this too. And I think I was like, oh man, what does that, mean? What are they trying to, I'm not saying that, but like most people, not most, but a lot of people have to convince themselves of that, or they think they're not as good as they are. And it's difficult to have somebody tell you, no, you're not a piece of shit, because a little part of you tells you you are. And like, if you're in this character's place, you are over time, just reinforcing that over and over again because it's easier to do. And so you have the smartest man in the world tell you, no, you're a good person. It really works.
This is a great place to talk about BetterHelp.
I thought you were going into it. I was like, they're not this week, but I guess they're getting a freebie.
We post the pick on Instagram. Someone commented asking about the series. This is not a jumping on point.
No.
It only has the emotional weight because you have read the previous 6 issues of them having adventures together. If you start with this, it's not really going to mean anything. Unfortunately, we've already spoiled it. But the point is this. It shows you the quality of the craft of the last 6 that this issue hit like it did. Even though, like I said, the themes are universal. But, as annoying as that dialogue could be, the Einstein dialogue, they were fun together.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fun little adventure story. And so to have this unexpected time jump to where it's over, and now there's another arc starting, theoretically, it could be at any time. They could go back. I don't see why they would. They would totally undercut this issue. But it was just a really unexpected, beautifully well done issue.
There's actually another thing that I liked about this was that, like, this whole story took place or it starts. And when I say this whole story, I mean like this Jeff Johns universe. It started for us sort of in the future,
Way in the future,
post-apocalyptic. And I don't know how far, not thousands.
No, but like
maybe
well
hundreds.
beyond where we are here.
Right. And so this book sort of indicates that the world before that was just like our world. Maybe not the same, but like this is the 50s of America that you recognize. So it's not like it's some crazy fantastical world. What happens later in this universe is to the same world we live in. I think that's interesting.
Terrific issue. Congratulations, Jeff Johns. I felt kind of like back when we used to talk all the time about that Brian Wood Revolutionary War book that no one else seemed to read but us. It feels similar to that. Mm-hmm. I hope it keeps going. I hope these books are successful. I think what Jeff Johns is doing is interesting here. Let's move on to The Amazing Spider-Man 954 or 60. Now, this is Zeb Wells' final issue.
I mean, if it isn't, then we really
said it before, but this is it. Wrapping up his 60 issue run. I don't remember we don't know how long it is. With the sort of coda on the Tombstone story. It also includes 4 backups where he tells like a little fun tale with some of the artists that have worked on the book previously, and then a small preview of the next story from the next creative team. This was a nice wrap.
I really liked it.
Yeah.
I grabbed it and I was like, oh, it's a big one. I mean, I got very used to in the Bendis era, they would do a big final issue and then it would just be pinups from all his artist friends. And I was like, this is not the coda that I want. I just used the word coda again. Right. But this really was like, here are all of the, not necessarily loose ends, but I'm going to touch on all the things that happened.
Or at least the big deal things that need to be touched on.
Yeah, but even like going back, some of it was very, I was like, oh, right. Thankfully I'd forgotten about Rep-Rack and I'd forgotten about.
Oh, you mean the other stories? I thought you were talking about the main story with Ramita.
No, so I do want to say with Ramita, though, at one point, I was perfectly aware that it was John Romita, but there is a page where it goes across where Sandman's arms are all twisted up. Mm-hmm. Around him.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at that now. Yep.
Just for a second, I went, "Who's that?" Because it doesn't look like Ramita. But as I was like, "Oh, of course this is Ramita." But we've talked about this. You put him in the right situation, he's great. And I just thought, I was like, "Wow, he drew the crap out of this issue." On this last one, going away from it, like still doing it. But that specific panel with those arms all twisted up, I was like, "That's really good."
And I also like from a story standpoint. So that we wrap up the Tombstone trial, he is let go in a technicality, Spider-Man related. So Peter feels bad about himself going through all of this stuff. Tombstone does not go to prison. And so he's feeling low about it. But then he doesn't have time to feel too low because the original Sandman, Flint Marko, shows up because I forgot there are other Sandmen. I liked the choice to bring him back to the classic villain to sort of reset him. They don't totally reset him, but like he can't dwell too long on Tombstone because there are more days to save. And I just like the choice of bringing it back to like an original Spider-Man villain. To do so.
Yeah, look at that. I just found that page. I really liked that he's doing a great kindness for Joe Kelly here because what he did was he wrapped the whole thing up. Right, but at least he mentioned it. I was getting to that. I knew, but basically he did a full reset. He's like, there's not I ended the Tombstone story and he's not in jail and Peter's back on the thing. It was a very good ending in an ongoing, never-ending comic book form, I thought.
Yes, we've been saying forever, this is the best example of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the real point of the Sandman bit is that, May is there and she's all mad at Spider-Man because Peter's always helping him. Peter's always getting hurt. Wink, wink, wink. We're winking, not May.
I didn't know if she was going to I was like, is this where I know it's you? And it wasn't that, which I thought that was interesting.
Or even, is he going to say it? But
right.
They have a nice little, was it breakfast together?
The pizza.
Well, it could be breakfast.
Wait, hold on. I can't believe I skipped over this. But John Romita, lifelong New Yorker.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy with the work he's done here. I have no complaints. What's even best, though, is at the beginning of it.
It's floppy. That's good.
No, but at the beginning of the scene, the pizza is sort of crispy and it's firm. And as the scene goes on, it's more floppy, as happens.
Yes.
With pizza over time. So we do not have an award system. But far, I can tell you that he does have the logo of the pizza inside the box.
That's no good.
That's weird. I can't imagine Bruno's is going to spend the extra money on the
interior.
Hardly
any pizza place has its own logo box. They all buy that generic pizza box.
That's a good point, too.
But, it leaves him and May in a good spot. Tombstone's still there with a weird kind of X-Men mask on his face. The rabbit chick's gone.
I liked that scene.
That was a great scene, too. I just thought the first story was a great little ending to his run, which is a great run.
I did have a think in this, a thought, is like May came on and I was like, I had no idea what Aunt May is now.
Right.
I didn't know if she was alive or dead. This Aunt May came in. I was like, okay, so it's the old one who doesn't know that he's Peter Parker. It's just like I've lost complete track of Aunt May.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We've talked about this before, and we actually just got an email. It's not in this show, but we just got it. What happened to secret identities? And that Aunt May is part of that we just don't get it. Anyway, so then he does little, like, I don't know, 4-page stories, 3-page stories.
3-pager on Rep Rack.
Rep Rack's a 3-pager. The Todd Nowak one's longer. That one's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Which is the one that's a problem.
That's the 8-pager.
It's good, crazy superhero stuff with a weird villain, but I turned it on and I said, oh, is this that clone of Peter Parker who has the red hair? And I was like, oh, no.
Right, yeah. I thought it was like Knockout, one of those.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the first story is Peter has to take Rep Rack to the hospital because he hurt himself. It's just a little joke. It's a little 3-page gag story, but at the end of it, Rep Rack is flying away on the Green Goblin glider, and there's a little editor's note saying, he's your problem now.
Sorry, Joe. Now you have to use him.
So that was fun.
It's great McGinnis. I want to make sure I get
really good.
I'm looking at these pages like, man, this guy is still great too. Again, he needs to have the right kind of stuff.
Those arcs he did were terrific.
Yes, no, absolutely. But just these guys, he's been around for 20, 30 years or whatever. They're still great. There is longevity in comic books if people want to keep doing it. And I really love that.
Inked by Mark Farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second story we just mentioned is the Mary Jane, we keep forgetting she's got powers story, where they're teamed up. But the whole conceit really is that they're both late to their date now. They're having a double date with Peter's new girlfriend and her husband that just keeps sticking around. And now the irony is she is in the position that she always complained that Peter was in, where they're both late because they were fighting crime together.
I mean, I can hate that, and I can hate her stupid powers and her awful costume. But I was like, that was a pretty good last few pages. I gotta,
Oh, the bit with them together was great.
Yeah.
It was like, this is what it was always like, and now I get it. And then she's like, as they're walking in the restaurant, we just really thank you for saving me, because he's what brought her back. And he's like, I'm always going to save you. And there's like a moment where she's like, oh, fuck. So like, you got to keep that simmering in the background, because they can always go back to that, which they will eventually. Eventually, this guy from the early 90s soul band will go away. But this random Paulo Rivera story with Wolverine was great.
I am willing to give Paulo Rivera some kind of Eisner for this 3 pages or whatever. I was like, who did this? It's gorgeous. A wonderful turtleneck Wolverine.
It's a 3-page story of them at a bar because it's Wolverine's birthday. And Peter has told him once that he would always hang out with him on his birthday. Logan's like, you don't really have to keep doing it. And he's like, I told you, I won't leave you alone on your birthday. It was 3 pages, but it conveyed so much.
Yeah.
It was really, really well done.
No joke. I appreciate you coming out again. I'm never going to, again, this is actually very similar. Happy birthday, Logan. You're a good guy.
Yeah.
And you want the best guy to tell you you're a good guy when you spend all this time proving that, you're not the best guy. You're the best at what you do, but what you do isn't nice.
And then, of course, we go from that to the kick in the balls. That is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many pages does this go?
A lot.
Too many. Oh, no, that's the Kelly story. 8 pages of having to deal with, what's his fucking name? I've already blocked it out. Chasm.
Ben Reilly.
Yeah, but Chasm.
I know.
Ben Reilly.
This is another example of, I don't like this story, but he did this really good.
Yeah.
This was a great sequence with them in the coffee shop, like Heat, and just, pulling the rug out from under you. Can I tell you something else? Bushwhacker is the creepy. I don't like him. I don't like his weird gun hands because they're fleshy. It's always gross. Bothered me. It's bothered gross. Me since he was in my copy of the Marvel Handbook.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's creepy. I don't like that. I can still see it.
And so, the whole thing is that he tells Peter what Peter wants to hear, that he's okay now. He's not obsessed with it anymore. He's going to stop going after him and bothering him.
I don't want your life.
We see that he really hasn't. And he also tells us he's lied. And so he's still there lurking.
I mean, it's a pretty good Spider-Man villain.
He's like herpes. And so then we have an 8-pager from Joe Kelly and Mark Buckingham. I don't know if Mark Buckingham's the artist on the new arc or not, but Joe Kelly's definitely the writer.
That would be amazing.
Ugh. I liked the art a lot. It had a very late 80s spectacular Spider-Man feel.
Yeah.
Not an amazing Spider-Man feel, but a spectacular Spider-Man feel.
Yeah.
People our age will probably know what that means.
But just a little bit of that Spider-Man has a little bit of Romita Sr. in it.
Yeah, totally.
I really like that. In fact, there's a lot of Romita Sr. in it. It's got the little eyes. All the lines are really smooth. The tiny little spiderweb wings.
That
That's good
first
stuff.
shot of him jumping with his arms back, he looks like the cartoon from the 60s.
Yeah.
I will
It's
confess
excellent.
to having only skimmed this because I don't like reading previews. I feel like it takes away from...
I was curious, but also just like, as soon as I was
I
more
looked at the art. I didn't really so much absorb the story.
It's going to be tough because, it's a long run that was very dependable in its, sort of classic melodrama, and it's, not written for the trade. Like, we're lucky to be the kind of readers who we are who get that. So
it appears now that Dr. Doom will be the villain of the first arc. Dr. Doom also the villain over in Avengers.
We're getting back to Dr. Doom. They were like, we know we put him as the Sorcerer Supreme, but we needed some time to work things out. Now let's go for it.
They're setting up Dr. Doom to be the next... I think the next event is the Doom as bad guy event, so they're setting it up.
Also, should be noted, like, I loved this run or whatever, but Joe Kelly is one of the best Spider-Man writers
ever
consistently I've ever read.
Yeah.
And further, I think this is important. From what I know about the success of their little company's thing, like, he's not doing this because he has to.
No.
Like, he doesn't have to do monthly comic books, but he wants to, and he's really good. I mean, I don't know that. Maybe he lost it all at the track. But Ben 10 did very well.
Santa Anita is a very seductive place.
Yeah.
So I was not aware because we don't read the solicitations and things, and so that often means we walk into rakes here on the show. But Batman, The Long Halloween, the last Halloween, #2, was expecting Eduardo Risso, got Klaus Janson. Ironically, just having done a show about Batman: The Dark Knight Returns and talking a lot about him, at least amongst ourselves. The thing is, Klaus Janson's got a very weird art style when he's not inking, when he's just doing his own art. And it's always been that way. You go back to the 80s. It's a very unique, and I'm not saying it's bad, it's just a weird style. It's like superhero, but like tilted. It's not your normal superhero style.
I love it. I think
I'm not saying it's bad at all. It's just different.
I think it's a lot of did Jeff Johns Flash?
Oh, Scott Collins.
There's a lot of Scott Collins to it, but like a little older, I guess. Mm-hmm. There's some guys like I can't judge them. I can tell when they screw up big time, but this guy's a legend.
Oh, I'm not saying this is bad at all. I'm just saying he's got this all unique style that's totally different than everything else.
But I'm saying I can't sit here and tell you I'm reading it and I was like, I think this is great. I don't know if that's a good review. I don't know. Like, that's as much. I'm saying that's as much as I can tell you. Like, at this point, I think I said this when we talked about Frank Miller, is that this is a person where I don't need to respect them anymore. I'm just curious to see what they do. Like, I'm past that point. It's fascinating to watch it.
I was just happy to see that he still got it.
Yes.
And these are not skimpy pages. These are thick with detail and backgrounds and action and characters. And this is
you do kind of get the sense that like the Batman that this guy grew up with and loving was like 70s Neil Adams Batman.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like that. He doesn't draft like that, but it certainly has that spirit, that uprightness of Batman.
Which is interesting because it's so different than Risso's work in the first issue.
Yeah, I didn't realize this was going to be.
I didn't either. And so first, on the one hand, that's cool if they're going to be giving us like a different sort of all-star artist. On the other hand, it doesn't really make the book feel very cohesive. And I don't really know why we're doing this. I mean, I know why every comics publishes to make money, but I just don't know what the story here is that makes it worth telling yet.
If it is just because Jeff Loeb wants to do another story with a bunch of different artists. And the other thing is, because Tim Sale isn't in it, then it's a big choice to pick, like, who's the person who finishes it. Like, whoever finished Jim Kruger's stuff for Earth X,
right.
Replacing a person like that is really difficult. And so instead to do this, like, we're going to do one story, but it's going to feature multiple artists sort of in tribute to that. I'm cool with that. That cover, there's a Tim Sale. It's not done for this, but it's so Tim Sale. And I was like, oh, we didn't realize how.
Huge loss. And we're going to talk about him in a minute, but.
Yes.
Looks like Mark Chiarello is the next artist.
He was the editor.
And an artist.
Is he an artist? I don't even know him as that.
He was the art director, wasn't he?
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as a sequential
artist.
People
love artists. Anyway, we'll see. We'll find out. That's just looking at the next issue thing at the end, which I didn't look at last time. Otherwise, then I would not have been surprised to see Klaus Janson.
Oh, I would have forgotten.
Hey, you nerds. This episode is brought to you by Nerd Hero. Stop hiding your collection. Start showing it off. We're so excited to share with you an exciting new product from Nerd Hero, the Nerd Shelf. It's a premium frame and shelf unit designed to display comics, 8x10 prints, standard magazines, and collectibles in a sleek, modern design that turns any collection into a stunning centerpiece. The Nerd Shelf is flexible. It mounts on the wall to save space while keeping your collection secure, and has interchangeable frames to easily switch out and customize your display with 2 frame options. Best of all, it's easy to assemble and comes with everything you need in order to show off your collection. When you unpack your Nerd Shelf, you get assembly screws and rubber feet for stability. The shelf itself is spacious, perfect for action figures, statues, figurines, memorabilia, anything in your collection that you want to show off. So I think we need to describe what this is. So it's a frame but also has a shelf attached. So you can frame a comic. And the reason why we know about these guys is because our co-founder, Ron Richards, bought one of these. And he's currently displaying X-Men 18, his oldest copy of X-Men, in it.
Is it Uncanny X-Men 18?
Well, they didn't call it Uncanny back then. It was just X-Men.
Fair.
And so it's got a little shelf that's perfect for, you can fit an action figure, or you can fit like what are those toy things everybody loves?
Funkos?
I never liked them. The eyes freak me out. But so what you could do is you could put an X-Men comic there, you could put an X-Men Funko or action figure or 2 Funkos or 2 figures, whatever, and sort of make like a little triptych. They're really cool, which is honestly why we reached out to them, because Ron showed us a picture. We're like, that's cool. So elevate your collection today with the Nerd Shelf. Shop now at nerdhero24.com and use code iFanboy30 for, hold on to your nerd butts, 30% off. That's a lot. Act fast because the code only works till November 20th. Go to nerdhero24.com. Use code iFanboy30 for 30% off the Nerd Shelf. We'll have links on our page on iFanboy.com for the show. You'll find links there. Thanks to Nerd Hero for sponsoring iFanboy and for helping us celebrate our collections. It's a very cool shelf.
I have some stuff I could put on shelves.
Wolverine Revenge #3. This book is so interesting because it's, obviously it's an Elseworlds Jonathan Hickman story about a future in which a dying Magneto's EMP blast basically sends the whole Earth back into the Stone Age. Almost everybody's dead. But, the book's called Wolverine Revenge. And so in the first 2 issues, Wolverine and sort of the last survivors, the original Nick Fury, Captain America, and Winter Soldier, go to get the power source that Russia currently had to bring to the whole world, and end up all getting killed by Omega Red, Deadpool, and Colossus, who are all defending Russia. And so I thought Wolverine Revenge would be about him getting revenge for the rest of the 8 issues. Or whatever it is, 6. Not so. In this issue, he kills Omega Red, Deadpool, and Colossus. And so now I don't know what's happening.
More revenge.
The cover next issue page shows Wolverine with a bushy white beard. And so I don't know what that means. This becomes an old man Logan situation, but this was actually a really well done issue. The Greg Capullo art is amazing. And the scenes in which he has to kill these guys were really well done. They weren't flippant, except for really Omega Red. Nobody cares about him. No. The Deadpool scene was really well done. They have a nuclear reactor that's melting because they weren't able to contain it. And Logan makes Deadpool think he's going to forgive him and let him come on his adventures, and instead he shoves him into the reactor. It was a really, really good scene. And then the whole thing with Colossus was sad, but it was a nice little fight scene between the 2 guys who brought us the fastball special. So this has been a great book. It just has. It's just weird and good. It's very good.
#3 is out. And I had thought, oh man, I think I missed #2. Mm-hmm. And now as you talk about it, I believe I missed all of them because I have no recollection of this. So I must have missed it.
You didn't read #1 we talked about in the show.
Okay.
And I didn't know if you'd gone back or not.
Now, then there was the other Wolverine book that is coming out.
There's a regular Wolverine series, yes.
Okay, see, I believe I had conflated those 2 in my mind.
In that one, he's in the Canadian wilderness. This is the one where...
Right. So for years, I've trained my brain to really kind of not see Wolverine minis and X-Men spin-offs.
Which is why you stopped reading comics in the 90s, because you went to the comic store and you just thought they were empty, because all Wolverine comics.
It's true. I was like, I guess nothing new came out.
Colossus rips off his arm at one point, and then Wolverine just puts it back to his shoulder and it sort of scooches back together. Like, it was just really well done. This is the kind of book you want Greg Capullo to draw. Big old action comic with big old action panels. Savage Sword of Conan #5. Jason Aaron joins the fun. We're just living in Jason Aaron's midlife crisis right now.
Oh my God. So,
and it's wonderful.
Oh my God. So after Jason Aaron wrote, I don't know, it was a year or 2.
Conan the Barbarian for Marvel, right?
For Marvel, which I loved.
Conan. King Conan was good too.
This guy was made to do this character. And then Jim Zub took over that book.
Zub.
Not a big fan of his work. Historically, I read a bunch for a while and I was like, this guy, not my kind of guy. So then they moved it over to Titan Publishing. And Jim Zub was writing that main book also. And I was like, oh, well. And they came out with this Savage Sword of Conan book. And it was different. And it was cool.
It's an old school anthology.
Black and white. I opened it up this week. And I see Jason Aaron. And I was like, oh, my God. So it's just a continuation of his stories from before. He's got Khan, the son. Like, it's the same version, and he's really, really, really good at doing this Robert E. Howard style. Right. And I don't know who Jeff Isherwood is, but you are channeling the spirit of John Buscema, and I'm here for you.
Yeah, that was great. But I do want to mention real quick, there's a terrific Tim Sale pinup from 2005.
I saw that.
In this anthology, they're always putting in pinups, and this is a Tim Sale one. Really, really, really nice. A lot of great ink wash on it.
Tits?
Well, it's Conan.
Yeah.
So this story, which is called King Conan, the Ensorcelled, I love that word. Ensorcelled is a great word. This is an old Conan. He's 58 years old here, and he has been brought on to help kill this witch. He ends up not necessarily thinking she should die, but perhaps the people that brought him on should die, which is a classic Conan conceit. But they all think he's been ensorcelled as a result, and so there's lots of mayhem and killing of witches, and there's an army of polar bears somehow.
I don't believe they're polar bears. I think they're just bears, but it's in black and white, so they read as polar bears.
That could be.
I
just
thought
assumed they
that
were polar
halfway
bears.
through. I had that thought. I was like, man, why are there polar bears? And I was like, Josh, it's in black and white. They can't do brown. And I was like, oh.
That's true. You're right about that. But just a really terrific, and like you said, those Conan books that Jason Aaron wrote were great. And this was great. This is part 1, so it's a continuing story. I don't know how many chapters it'll be, but I'm enjoying it. And then, like you've been getting with all these, you get 2 other stories. You got a 2-page short from Jim Zub, Conan, Damn Thing in the Water, where he goes to drink some water out of a thing. A creature grabs him and he kills it.
It was a little lacking, I thought.
It was just like, all right, we got to fill 2 pages.
I was like, what is that? And it was like, Damn Thing in the Water. I was like, I guess it lived up to the title.
It felt like old school comics where they were like, we need 3 pages to fill.
Yeah. That's how Stan Lee got a job.
Someone write a 3-page short. So I liked it for that sense. And then there was Conan forged from 2 names I don't know, Michael Kogi and Dan Parsons. Should be noted that Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith did all the lettering for this book. And that was an interesting story about young Conan sort of learning a lesson.
It was good.
And he's got to stab someone in the neck with a spoon. I really look forward to these Savage Sword of Conan. And I feel like it's been more than 5. How's that possible?
I feel like they're bi-monthly. I think they come out
definitely bi-monthly, but I feel like there should be 7.
They're very spread out. I always worry that I missed one because it's so long, but I've loved all of them. Now we've gotten rid of, who's the Pilgrim Conan that was in the other one?
Whenever you say that, I can see the information leaking out of my brain.
Yeah, but I don't
I want to say
character.
Paladin, but that's not right.
No.
The one who's exactly Conan, but it was created before Conan.
Is it Robert E. Howard also?
Yes.
Okay.
And he was created before Conan was created.
Salvad? No. They did him at Dark Horse for a while.
Right.
I remember, and I was like, I don't get this.
It's just Conan and the Pilgrim Age.
Yeah. I know that age is not super interesting for this kind of story.
Solomon Kane.
There you go. What was I saying? Salvador? Yeah, that's
Salvador LaRocca, you were saying. I mean, he looks like Conan and has the same stories. It's just he has a big pilgrim hat instead of a loincloth.
Mm-hmm.
But I love this book, and I love when it comes out. You're right. It's crazy. He's just continuing his story in another publisher, which is how it happens with licensed books.
Great. I'm totally fine with that.
Speaking of Jason Aaron, Namor number 4 of 8 is out this week. The story of Namor finding how to be a better king.
By the way, real quick, I had to look this issue up, and I found a Namor number 4 that went first. It was Andy Watson and no, wait, that wasn't who it was.
Was it Salvador LaRocca again?
Oh, I forget it. It's gone now. No, but there was an Andy. What was it? It was an Andy Watson and yeah, no, I think it was. It was like Namor number 2 from a miniseries, and it was Andy Watson.
I think Andy Watson did do it Namor.
And Salvador LaRocca.
It was Salvador LaRocca. That's why he's on your brain.
Yeah. And I was like, that's the oddest thing. And I was like, there was a point where Andy Watson, we were talking about indie comics on the last show.
Yeah.
He did great slice of life kind of comics that were like, he illustrated super, like I'd kind of forgotten about him. I was a big fan, and I was like, man, everybody got their Marvel shot, but I didn't expect that.
There was a time when that was happening. So this book continues the dual storytelling. Namor in the present day trying to avert total warfare in the oceans where all the factions are gearing up to fight each other. This one includes the beasts, the Beast King, sort of the coral. These stories always deal with the humanoid Atlanteans or like the fish, but the ocean's full of all kinds of living creatures, including coral. And so here we get some big Jason Aaron thinking about how coral would move and fight.
And speak.
It's still vaguely humanoid, but it was interesting.
As the man who's put giant sharks in all of his books for years, I feel he's been very restrained in this book, which would seem to be like the time. He's got battle whales and shit.
Well, he did mention in the beginning that one of the creatures had teeth the size of great white sharks.
Yeah.
So he made sure to get it in there.
I mean, it's like they're getting their respect. They're getting their nod.
I like this book. I don't love it, but I like it.
I really like what this is doing for a character who has been a little lost, and sort of reforming him in this Marvel world is because he's tricky. They use him, they can make him evil, they can make him good, they can do whatever. And this is, a background story that I feel like I haven't read that, there's a bit here where basically he's like, we're not taking care of these poor people. And then his grandfather, who is king, is like, it's not your job. You're not in charge, and you still have to do what I say. And so then Namor does do what he's ordered to because that's his job to do, even though he doesn't like it. And I think, that's interesting because you're putting him at odds with himself.
But he also finds a way to rebel by adhering to the letter, if not spirit, of the law.
But there's also a bit where, like he said, he brought a bunch of food to the sailors and he went and he slummed with the lower class folk and had a great time. And they were like, we'll love you. We can't wait till you're king, you know? And he goes, and I was dumb enough to believe that. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's so good. That is that stuff. That's the Jason Aaron who wrote Scalped.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's that sort of understanding of systems and people and power, you know, that he's always had innately. I just think the book has a lot going for it. I find it very interesting because I think Namor is one of those characters who it's easy to lean on Imperious Rex and make big things happen, but he's going for it. I enjoy it. That's all.
So those are the books we're going to talk about on this very short week, this 5th week of comics. But at patreon.com/iFanboy, every patron of the show gets a vote to add a book to the rundown. It's called the Patron Pick. And as often happens on the 5th week, strange books are chosen. Votes are spread out. And the winner this time was Poison Ivy /Swamp Thing, Feral Trees #1. It's a all-in-one shot. Written by G. Willow Wilson, art by Mike Perkins. Colors by Mike Spicer, and letters by Hassan Asmane Alao. We love G. Willow Wilson. She's writing one of my favorite books, which is the Sword and Sorcery book over at IDW, whose name escapes me at the moment.
A Hunger in the Dusk.
The Hunger in the Dusk. One of my favorite books, whose name I can't remember, but it's true. She wrote terrific Miss Marvel stuff, but I don't know what this book... why this book... what this book... all the questions. I was halfway through it. I was like, why am I reading this? Like, I know why, but what is this book telling me? There were interesting things that happened in it. I liked a lot the conversation between Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing about their different motivations. And I really liked her conversation with the Parliament of Trees, who were like the Ents in Lord of the Rings, where they were like, your concerns don't bother us because we live so much longer than you. Our timeline is so different than yours. I like that conversation quite a bit. But overall, I finished it and I was like, what was the point of that?
I mean, I think it's a one-shot where they were just sort of doing something. It's a little like, have these characters ever been together? Because it's interesting to put these two characters together. That makes sense.
That is definitely true.
It was gorgeous. I really thought like Mike Perkins and Mike Spicer, like perfect for this planty green flashbacky stuff. You know, the story was, girl who grows up badly, gets abused, ends up on drugs, drives the trees crazy. As will happen. But it was just like, as a sort of like, I've read a lot of, I guess it's kind of horror-y. Like it's a little like this came out on Halloween, but
yeah, a little bit.
But as far
horror
as these
only in the fact that it's sort of like the iconography of Swamp Thing is sort of horror, but it wasn't like a horror story.
I don't really have a feeling of how Poison Ivy is supposed to be. I don't really care. So they made a version of her here and definitely have her leaning on the human side of things compared to the trees, which is interesting, which sort of frames her as more of like instead of a plant person, more like a radical, progressive environmentalist.
Yeah.
Who's sleeping with Harley Quinn.
Yeah, that's been a long time.
So it was fun. I enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, I didn't think this was bad. I just was like, I don't understand why this is happening. Like, was there a copyright or...
I was like, why did they pay for this?
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. But, I mean, like I said, there were stuff I really liked in it. And the Mike Perkins art is definitely on the top of the list. It's so weird looking. And it's so perfect for, especially Swamp Thing. He gives him that long, pointy nose. There's always a point in the middle of the show where my computer switches over to nighttime mode, and it freaks me out for a second.
Who is Swamp Thing now?
I think it's still Alec Holland.
I hope so.
It's Alec Holland in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing in here to... I know that the Rom V had a different guy. I think it had an Indian man as Swamp Thing. I didn't finish that, though, so I don't know where it ended up.
This feels like Alec Holland.
Yes.
They have some sort of... not history, but there's some sort of familiarity between the two characters. So you've got to assume that someone's been around a long time and not someone who's new. And also had someone who really seemed to know the lay of the land. I don't know about this new character or what he knows or doesn't know, but seemed to be like an old hand Swamp Thing. But I like Swamp Thing. I think he's a cool character. I think the design's great. I don't like a lot of Swamp Thing, but I like a little bit. A little Susan of Swamp Thing.
Yeah, the Swamp Thing can go either way. I mean, like some of the best stories I've ever read are Swamp Thing stories.
Yeah, Alan Moore stories.
Some of the incredibly forgettable stories I've read have also been Swamp Thing stories.
Yeah, I mean, the Alan Moore book was great. The start of the New 52 Swamp Thing stuff was good.
Lemire?
It was Scott Snyder, wasn't it?
Charles Soule?
I think it was Scott Snyder, and it was Yannick Paquette.
There you go. Yep. I knew there was a P in there.
Anyway, Poison Ivy /Swamp Thing, Feral Trees #1. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5.
3.6. It's because I don't think you're wrong, but I think I liked it a little more than you. So I was like, I don't want to go to 4.
You could say 3.4. 3.1.
No. I think I liked it more. I had to be higher than you.
All right. I said 3. You could have said 3.1.
I think you said 3.5.
No, I said 3. 3.5. No, 3.
You monster. Stop giving away half stars. I'm still going to go with 3.6. I like that. I like how that feels.
Okay. And would you have read this if it had been the patron pick?
No.
Neither would I.
So I'm not unhappy that I read it.
And sticking with it? Well, no, it's a one-shot, so we cannot stick with it.
I don't know that I would if it weren't.
I would not if it was an ongoing. But again, liked that they picked this book. This was an unusual pick.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't an Image #1. It wasn't a straight-up horror book from like IDW or whoever makes horror books now. I'm not saying you shouldn't pick those things. I'm just saying that tends to be what gets picked. I liked that this was unusual, and so thank you.
Quality creators on it, not like super big name. I don't know how big.
That's true, because when we saw this book was winning, I didn't know who the creators were. And so I was like, oh no. And I opened it up and was like, oh, okay. Well, it's G. Willow Wilson and Mike Perkins.
Mike Perkins.
Won't be terrible. Mike Perkins.
It's so fun to do that.
Mike Perkins.
I can't. Hey, if you like the show, or if you just need to get rid of some cash, you can go to patreon.com/iFanboy. A lot of people, I assume, out there just like, I don't know what to do with this money.
That's what I assume everything happens. Like people walking around going, I've got pockets full of cash and don't know what to do.
Yeah. Or like if you have, like, let's say you have a lot of change. You want to bring it to one of those machines, trade it in, and then you can go to, I'm so sorry. Patreon.com/iFanboy. You can directly, okay.
Let's talk about the change for a second. If you had a lot of change, I was always led to believe you could take it in and they'll give you 5 quarters, or they'll give you 4 dimes and 2 nickels, or basically whatever you want, because they make change. That's what I was told.
What if I want like 20 pennies and 14 dimes and 2 quarters? Can they do that?
They can do that.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
You can directly support this.
People tune in for the references to mid-1980s Saturday Night Live sketches. That's why they tune in, and that's why they support us at patreon.com/iFanboy.
Early 90s? I saw Jim Downey in something the other day, and I
was
like,
it early 90s? It was probably early 90s. I'm overshooting the mark there.
No, mid-90s, it was Farley and Sandler. And
right, early 90s.
Yeah.
Kevin Nealon. Jim Downey.
Nealon, Carvey, Hartman, that's late 80s, early 90s. Unlock shows for everybody. Become part of a great community on Discord and Facebook. Great communities. Can't say enough about them. The monthly Patron Hangout, that's there. Very important to us. Thank you very much for the people who have supported us when possible. If you can't, I respect that. If you're thinking about it, always welcome. iFanboy.threadless.com merch store. There are currently 13 sizes to be put on t-shirts or other items. Many, many items. Or shirts, not just t-shirts.
Get this, though. We are in the midst of talking about possibly doubling the number of designs in the store right now.
You haven't actually committed us, but you did just commit us.
Well, yeah, especially since you're in charge of them.
I didn't ask for that. I just had an idea.
You pitched the
idea.
I'm an
idea guy.
If you pitch it, you got to run with
it.
You have to be project manager.
I think we know I'm not an execution guy.
We're getting ready to add a bunch of new shirts. We have some ideas.
Yeah, happy about it. Yeah. iFanboy.com/support. Direct donations available there via PayPal. Also, if you want to email me directly, I can give you my PayPal email address or Venmo.
Whoa. Don't be cutting everyone else out. You can't send me side deals.
Listen, sometimes people have favorites, and I'm willing to bet on that.
Yeah, but you can't do that.
I just did.
You've got it on record. This is going to be in the court case.
If you're like in NSYNC and Joey Fatone wants to break out on his own and go for a jump, can he do that?
He can be a solo act, but you're not doing this as a solo act.
Lou, what's his name? Do we have one of those guys who gets like 80% of everything we do? iFanboy.com/Amazon. The holidays are coming up. You use that for the general Amazon link. We appreciate it. Bookshop.org. We partner with bookshop.org to help out local bookstore. They aggregate local bookstores to get you the books that you want to order, and they come to your house and support those wonderful businesses. Those links will be on the website where appropriate. Every week, we thank a patron who has supported us at the $5 or higher level at patreon.com/iFanboy, which I earlier alluded to by giving them a superpower of our own device. Connor, what is in store for Dave D?
Dave D, important to note, all lowercase. So I feel like that's important.
It's like E.E. Cummings.
It's like E.E. Cummings. He's probably E.E. Cummings' great-grandson. Dave Cummings. Dave, when he makes finger guns, shoots out rubber bands. Pew, pew, pew. Any kind of big, thick ones, little tiny ones that like sort of sting when they hit you, ones that really hurt.
He should fight a guy who... I just wasted a power, by the way.
Well, hold on to it. People might forget. We could also bleep it out. But he shoots bing, bing, bing finger guns that shoot rubber bands as hard as he wants.
Or as soft as he wants.
True. He can
Like he's
modulate.
just trying to make a point. But I'm guessing over time he's gotten quite good at the accuracy of that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe you throw a bunch of straws in the air and he goes bing, and he wraps them up like a trick. Maybe. I don't know. That's up to Dave.
Like a trick.
Patreon.com/iFanboy.
It's the most grandfather. Hey,
Like a trick.
He does it like a trick, where's my pillow?
I often say that. Patreon.com/iFanboy is where Dave D went and became a patron at $5 higher level. Thanks for being a patron, Dave. Thanks all the patrons out there. Every one of them. So, first of all, the show, much longer than I thought it would go, the amount of books we had to talk about, but that's something I should probably stop thinking every time. Let's do at least one of these emails, and I think the first one we'll do is Scott H. from Portland, Oregon, your old nemesis, Scott H. How do you define what constitutes an A, B, or C-list character in your mind? Is it their historical significance? Is it how they are used in stories? Can characters graduate from C-list or be downgraded from the A-list? Also, we see that Scott is not a fan of the Oxford comma.
I can't hold it against people because it's not a rule, but I definitely prefer it.
Oh, yeah, I prefer it for sure.
When you speak, you put a comma in there. So therefore, it's the way it should be. It's the correct thing, and I like it. See what just happened?
So, A, B, or C. So I think for me, it is a combination of a lot of things.
Do you think that before you go, do you think that the movies and such have influenced this? So 20 years ago, you may have said Dr. Doom is an A-list comic book villain, and it would be true. But now in the larger sense of the world, he hasn't been in the movie or, anything worth it. So is he not A-list?
That is a really good distinction. Are we talking about to the general public or to the comic book world? Because I would have said... you know what? I would have said up until 2008, Iron Man was a B-list character, even within comics, even though he had his own book.
No, you're right.
But once he became the biggest superhero in the world in the movies, he became an A-list character.
I still don't think of him like that in comic books.
I know, but you're right, because our whole lives, he was a great character who anchored his own book since the 60s, but was still a B-list character. If you read the Avengers comics from the old days, he's off to the side.
He was the same as Daredevil.
Yeah, he's not one of the main actors unless it's a story revolving around him. He's usually just in the background.
And as a result of that, when he's in comics, I still think he's only here because of the movies. Like, not all the time, but he's like in an Avengers books now, he's heavily featured. And I was like, this isn't his gig. This is just for Robert Downey Jr.
And so that's how you can upgrade. What he says here, yes, characters can graduate. You can move up the list based on a lot of factors, one of which is, I think, the general public's knowledge of, and therefore you get your presence increased in the books themselves.
Can you upgrade in just comics? I would like to approach this from a comic book standpoint.
Sure.
It's more interesting.
I always think of Iron Man because he was the solid B-lister who became an A-lister because of the movies. I always think of him as the
Guardians
prototypical.
of the Galaxy were C-listers who became A-listers.
But are they? They can't keep a book to save their lives?
Maybe, but we'll see. That's the thing. Are we talking about comic books or whatever? Like in the world, Rocket Raccoon is an A-lister.
Yeah, in the world. Okay, you're right. It just didn't translate to comics, whereas it did for Iron Man.
So this is interesting. So it did for Iron Man. Yeah, you're right. That's very interesting. All right.
In the comics, how do you define an A-list character?
An A-list character is a character who usually has been around for a very long time, is sort of one of the roots Marvel or DC characters. That's what we're talking about here. Can carry their own book. If they are a guest star in an issue, it would have been a big deal in the past when things like that
Back when that mattered, yeah.
Right. B-lists are fan favorites, but not necessarily able to carry their own books. Would you say Hawkeye was a B-list or a C-list character, or does that depend on the era?
That depends on the era, but he was never more than a B-list character, and I think he still is a B-list character.
I agree.
I mean, the A-listers are like the obvious ones, Superman, Batman, Wolverine, Spider-Man.
Well, I think so. Like Wolverine was a B-list character who graduated to an A-list character, and that had a lot to do with Claremont and then Frank Miller.
Right. No one starts off as an A-list character, but he was probably a B-list. I mean, he was a
Spider-Man wasn't. I mean, like if we take it from like the mid-60s, I think that a lot of those were established. But I would say that
Iron Man
had
was there in the mid-60s.
More people go, right, but they were established where they were and they stayed there.
But he had his own book, that's what I'm saying. Like he just, for whatever reason, didn't become an A-lister, where Spider-Man leapfrogged to become the face of the company for whatever reason. And he became an A-lister.
Would you say the Fantastic Four were A-listers, or did
Oh,
they
man.
become B-listers?
Or are they C-listers in the world of comics?
Oh, I can't imagine they're C-listers.
I mean, to me, they're A-list always because of their historical significance, like he says in the email. They're the first team. They're the first family of Marvel. To me, after Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four represent Marvel.
In the 60s, they were A-list, and the X-Men were decidedly B-list, if not worse.
The X-Men were Z. They got canceled.
Yeah, right, exactly. I say it's more likely that people go from being C to B than from B to A.
C to B than B to A.
Yeah, like you can move up. It like if you've been on a good run of Avengers or something like that, and your character had a good sort of.
I think that's fair.
I mean, I don't know if this counts, but like Bucky was dead, but Bucky went from like a C-list background character to Winter Soldier, who was like a solid B.
Yes. The Fantastic Four are interesting because they're like a A-list emeritus. You know, like they are grandfathered in as A-list.
The Thing is certainly A-list. The Thing shows up in the last page of a comic book, and then the cover of the next one. Everyone's getting excited.
It's just that it's hard to say sales-wise. For years and years and years, they just no one bought their books, and so I don't know how they do now. They've certainly had long runs.
I think Thor went from being B to A and then back.
But that's because of the movies,
right? But then also kind of back. Like he's not really. He's a still supporting cast.
Yeah, he's back to being a B-lister for sure in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
He's not on the Avengers anymore. His book, you know, it's not like when Jason Aaron's writing it in terms of impact on the industry.
I think for a little while, Captain America was B-list. I think he wasn't like the big
draw
on the Avengers. I'm not saying it's okay. I tell you what, for a while, Superman was being treated like a B-list character because nobody could write him. So was Wonder Woman.
Well, the thing is, but those characters are icons, and they can never be B-list characters.
It's true. You know what I'm saying, though? Like, for a long time, nobody could write a good Superman story, or nobody could write a good Wonder Woman story, and those books flagged as a result of that.
Well, it sounds like you and I are both edging into the idea that the list you're on depends on your sales.
I don't know how else to determine popularity within comics, though.
Sure. Well, the thing is, like, there's other ways, like he says, there's a mishmash.
I tell you what, Wolverine went from C to B to A, and I think
he's back to B.
Back to B.
Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting.
Which is one of the things that constantly blows my mind, having grown up the time we grew up reading the comics we did.
So if we're not using sales, I mean, that's still the best way, because there was a time where if Wolverine showed up in anything, that would sell a lot of copies.
It would add 20,000 sales to the
his own Deadpool went from C to A. You know,
but
and
in comics,
for a little while, yes, because for a little while they'd have a Deadpool thing off to the side.
He doesn't even have a book right now.
Well, he did for a while, and he was.
I think he's A-list. He's 100% A-list in the culture,
in the world, yeah.
But in terms of comics, I got to put him back at C. He doesn't even have a series. He's not even in a book regularly.
Well, yeah, you might be right about that. I think for a while he was definitely either a soft A or a strong B.
Oh no, for sure. I think we're losing the criteria.
It doesn't matter.
I think we keep changing it.
It's okay. It's because there isn't one.
Right. I think we keep changing how to do this. For me, I know we're talking about just comics, but like for me, the global icons that will never not be A are like the Hulk, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Those five for me will always be A-list because everyone knows who they are in the world.
I was conflating it with sales in a way that I don't think was helpful. I do think that is a factor. That's what
like you said, how else to measure it? But it's an interesting because there's a secret sauce, there's influence, there's people being excited to see them in a book when they pop up at the last page. Like there's all kinds of factors that go beyond just sales. But
you know that Superman is a perennial A, even if in the sort of immediate the sales or popularity grows a little fallow. Like Superman is around or whatever, but then they're like Death of Superman, biggest thing in the world. Like, oh, you can only do that.
But that in the 90s, his books sold really well.
True.
So he was. It's that. I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know. I'm working on it. I'm trying
these
to think
days. Everyone is B or C. Go to sales.
That's true. As are all creators. People thought there was like, oh, there's a difference between Bendis and whoever, and there isn't. Steve Orlando's moving as many units.
I think the answer for Scott's question is that it all depends. There's all kinds of ways to call them A, B, or C.
But there is a gut feeling.
Yes.
Especially if you're talking about it within comics. If you try to conflate real world and comics, I think that there's a mismatch there. They will not agree. Like in the case of Deadpool or the case of Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom's an A-list villain by any measure in comics, but out in the world, no. So I think you have to delineate.
You're right. And Iron Man and
Deadpool, all that.
I can't believe Deadpool doesn't have a comic. Does he not?
I mean, he's got miniseries.
I think he's in one of those. No? He was in one of those X-Men books, but I don't think he is
It's
anymore.
just in like Deadpool World War or something was his last one. Because at first I thought Deadpool and World War III, but it wasn't that. And I didn't bother looking any further.
Thanks for writing in, Scott. Contact@ifanboy.com is how he did it. We want to hear from you, put you on the show. Your questions are always fun to answer. You can also write into our Media Explode show. We're having our final Media Explode of the year in November. So if you want to get your email, we got a couple of really great ones in the last week where we're going to try to get it on the show. We might do an end of the year mini mailbag, not a full mailbag, but a mini one. So if you have any Media Explode questions you want to get in, you've got about a week from our recording, less than a week from you hearing this. But if you're listening to this now, you got a Media Explode question, get it in. Let's do some quick, some longer plugs. So out now, right behind this show in the feed released this past week, was our Booksplode review of Batman: The Dark Knight Strikes Again. Very different take on the book. So it's a very interesting conversation. I enjoyed quite a bit. And behind that, a few shows back, is Josh's Talksplode interview with Jordan Thomas. So those are fun. Now, we're into November, which means we start talking about the holiday schedule. This is mostly for new listeners, so no one's confused, surprised, and angry, and we don't get any emails. We have 9 shows left this year. As of right now, there's always a chance an extra show could get added. It's probably unlikely, but you never. But as of now, we've got 9 shows on the schedule.
That brings us to 1,423.
5 picks of the week left this year. So we have next week's 953. Then that following week, we have our Media Explode show. And then on the November 17th, we got 954. That following week, we got Talksplode interview Josh is working on. And then 11/24, Pick Week 955. December 1st, Pick Week 956. December 8th, Pick Week 957, which is the final Pick Week of the year, December 8th. Then that following week, a few days later, will either be a Booksplode or a Talksplode. We have given you 6 Booksplodes. We're a little behind on the Talksplodes because scheduling is difficult. If we can't get one of those scheduled, we might do a bonus Booksplode. We'll let you know as soon as we know. And then December 15th is our traditional final show of the year, the All Media Year-End Roundup. And then we go on holiday break, and we come back January 5th for Pick of the Week 958. So that's the holiday schedule as we head into the last 2 months of the year somehow. Meanwhile, you can find our library of 1,414 shows. Is that right? 1,414 shows over at ifanboy.com or wherever podcasts are sold. Follow us at iFanboy Comics on Instagram. By the way, if someone's selling you podcasts, that's no bueno.
Yeah. But if you like your podcast,
people do sell special ones. They do sell those.
You can just email me for my Venmo number.
Stop emailing Josh. At least BCC me so I can really give my lawyer all the ammunition I need. So follow us at iFanboy Comics on Instagram.
I didn't sign shit.
I guess people do special shows that you have to pay for. But for the most part, podcasts aren't sold.
Yeah. Well,
iFanboy Comics on Instagram. You find out what the pick of the week is before the show comes out. And sometimes when I have time, the Best of the Week in Panels feature. And individually, we are C.S. Kilpatrick and J.A. Flanagan on Instagram.
And Venmo. I don't know if that's true.
And OnlyFans.
I mean, I'll do it, but you're not going to get what you want. Or maybe you will.
That's true.
This is the least sexy OnlyFans ever. It's just a guy with no socks on talking about Wolverine's popularity.
That might make you a good amount.
I had to put in something for the fetishists.
That's where you get the monies from the fetishists.
Listen, I'm not kink shaming.
Let's wrap the show up.
Somebody out there just felt a stirring. Somebody listening was like,
And that's why we do it. It's for the stirring. I mean, come on. Why else?
Sometimes that's all you have left.
That's all we got. That's all I got. That's all they got.
You finished your part?
I did.
All right. Subscribe to youtube.com/ifanboy. You'll get all of our old video shows, and we post this show on there every week in audio form with a very attractive still. Please continue writing. Please continue writing us every. If you've started one, you should continue writing a review,
finish
a
it.
star rating.
Yeah, finish
on
it.
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, if you're being charged for those podcasts, look into that because I think you might be able to get a discount somewhere. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure that you go into your podcast app and set iFanboy this show. I literally don't care what you do with your other shows to auto download. It very helps us out. I mean, if you really like a show and you don't want to miss it, you should obviously set those to.
But don't ask us to care about it.
I'm not concerned with that. Like I would do that.
You care about it, but us, we don't really care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It helps us out if you do that. You know that This American Life started a Patreon?
Oof,
you know how sad that makes me?
Oh.
Right?
Don't come down into our muck, This American Life.
Their show's really good.
We're down here in the muck. You should not be up down here.
No, I'm so sorry. By the way, if you love This American Life like I do, you should support it after us.
But us first. They're fine.
Get more sponsorship.
Ira Glass probably has a much better house than either one of us has. Yeah.
If you're listening on Pocket Casts, which I've never even heard of, you can now give this show ratings.
You
know what?
But
not only do you need to do it, you need to do it with a little verve, and I didn't hear it.
take two.
No, I'm not.
Take
Next
two. Come
time.
on, we'll back to one.
You can now give this. You can now give this show a rating.
Ratings.
You need to be subscribed and have downloaded a few episodes before you can do it. So take a few minutes, give us a rating. I prefer it to be nice.
Ratings.
That was late,
I'm
but
on
funny as a result. We appreciate all of you, and that will do it for this show.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Josh.
I just expected you to keep talking, and I realized, nope, he always goes last. And so then I had a moment.
I know, it felt weird to me too. I think because there's a break there, and
I think normally I go. That's it for this week's show, so that
Yeah.
you can go last, and then you threw a wrench in it.
Yeah, I don't know.